All right, let's play general for a second. Imagine your enemy has 10 times your number of soldiers, and they're marching straight for your home. What do you even do? Well, today, we're going to dive into one of the most audacious gambles in all of military history. It's about a single, desperate battle that set one man on the path to unifying a nation that was totally at war with itself. This is the incredible story of the Battle of Okahazama. Okay, so first things first, you just gotta let these numbers sink in for a moment. I mean, look at this. On one side, you've got the powerful warlord Imagawa Yoshimoto, and he's marching with a massive force of about 25,000 soldiers. And on the other side, a young, kind of brash upstart named Oda Nobunaga with a tiny army of only 3,000 men to defend his home. We're not just talking bad odds here, folks. This is a nearly 10-to-1 disadvantage. This was supposed to be an absolute slaughter, plain and simple. So, this brings us to the central question, the big mystery we're unpacking today. How in the world does an army that's so completely outmanned, outgunned, and let's be honest, seemingly outclassed, pull off a total decisive victory in just 2 hours? Right? This isn't just a battle we're talking about. It's a genuine historical puzzle. Okay, so to really get our heads around this puzzle, we've got to understand the world that happened in. See, in the mid-16th century, Japan was, well, it wasn't a single unified country, not at all. It was smack in the middle of this brutal, century-long civil war, known as the Sengoku period. You might have heard it called the Age of Warring States. Basically, a bunch of powerful warlords, the daimyo, had carved up the country into their own personal kingdoms, and they were all in a constant, bloody fight for total control. And right here, you've got the two men at the very heart of this conflict. It's a real David and Goliath situation. On one side, you've got Imagawa Yoshimoto. I mean, this guy was a giant of his time, the #1 daimyo in his region. His big plan? March on the capital, Kyoto, and get himself named shogun, the military ruler of all Japan. And on the other side, Oda Nobunaga. He was young, people thought he was kind of weird and eccentric, and he was just barely clinging to his home province. Seriously, to everyone watching, he was nothing more than a speed bump on Imagawa's road to glory. So what's a guy like Nobunaga supposed to do? Well, all the conventional wisdom, every military textbook of the day, said he should just lock himself up in his castle and, pray for the best. But instead, he did the unthinkable. He decided to attack. And the stage for this absolutely insane gamble was a narrow, wooded gorge on a hot, stormy afternoon. So you gotta picture this from the other side. Imagawa's campaign had started off flawlessly. He just steamrolled Nobunaga's border forts. It was easy. So his huge army, feeling pretty good about themselves, sets up camp in this narrow gorge to just kick back and celebrate. They're drinking sake, they're singing songs, and they are completely 100% oblivious to the danger they're in. Their own arrogance was setting the trap. Now, this is where Nobunaga's strategic genius just shines. He didn't just go for a blind, desperate charge. No, he had a brilliant 4-step plan. Okay, so 1, the decoy. He leaves a small force with a ton of banners and flags at a temple just to make the enemy scouts think his whole army was sitting tight. 2, the hidden march. He secretly takes his real army, all 3,000 of them, on this winding, hidden path through the hills to get behind the Imagawa camp. 3, and this is where luck and genius just collide, a massive thunderstorm suddenly rolls in. The pouring rain, the thunder, it's the perfect cover for his final approach. And then 4, the moment the storm clears, he gives the order, strike the head. They charge directly at Agawa's command post. And you can just feel the absolute shock of the attack from what Imagawa Yoshimoto said. When he hears all this commotion, he doesn't think it's an attack. He thinks his own guys are just getting drunk and rowdy from the party. He literally storms out of his tent, probably super annoyed, and starts shouting, "Maintain your composure! You must be drunk!" By the time he realized those weren't his samurai charging at him, well, it was way too late. The result? It was an absolute catastrophe for the Imagawa clan. In just those 2 hours, their massive army was completely shattered. They lost something like 8,500 soldiers. But the real killing blow, the most critical part, was that their leader, Yoshimoto himself, was killed in the chaos. The invading army just evaporated. So you might be thinking, wow, he got super lucky with that storm. And yeah, the storm helped. But here's the thing. This victory wasn't just a lucky break. It was a sign of something much, much bigger.
It showed that Oda Nobunaga wasn't just another warlord. He was a disruptor, someone who was totally ready to tear up the old rulebook of samurai warfare.
Now, to see the bigger picture, you have to understand that Okehazama didn't happen in a vacuum. Let's look at this timeline. Just 17 years before our battle, Portuguese traders show up and introduce a real game changer, the arquebus, basically an early musket. Now, Okehazama itself was one with classic strategy and swords, but Nobunaga was one of the very first leaders to see the massive potential of these new firearms. And he proved it just 15 years later at another famous battle, Nagashino, where he used thousands of musketeers in organized ranks to just completely wipe out the traditional samurai cavalry of a powerful rival. So this super fast adoption of new tech has led a lot of historians to talk about a military revolution happening in Japan. And the basic idea is that guns didn't just change how battles were fought, they changed society itself. See, they allowed guys like Nobunaga to build huge, disciplined armies that could be trained way faster than it took to train a traditional samurai warrior. Now, whether it was a sudden revolution or more of a fast evolution is something historians still debate. But one thing's for sure, Oda Nobunaga was right at the center of it all.
But listen, his success wasn't just about having the latest tech. Nobunaga developed a whole formula for conquest. It was a total package. Of course, you had the military innovation, adopting firearms and creating new kinds of infantry units. But he also used smart alliances and political marriages to build his power base. He wasn't afraid to use economic warfare, like burning villages and crops to break the will of a castle under siege. And as he conquered territory, he put it under his direct control, which weakened the other lords. And maybe most of all, he was absolutely ruthless. He crushed any opposition, even powerful sects of warrior monks. It was a new and honestly a brutally efficient way of waging war.
Okay, so let's bring it all back to that one stormy afternoon at Okehazama. What were the immediate consequences of this seemingly impossible victory? Well, to put it simply, everything changed.
I mean, look at this table. It shows just how incredible the reversal of fortunes was, and it happened practically overnight. The Imagawa clan, they went from being this dominant, feared power to being completely destroyed as a major force. And then there's this other guy, a young man named Tokugawa Ieyasu. Before the battle, he was just a hostage, a vassal forced to fight for Imagawa. But this victory set him free, and he would go on to become Nobunaga's most important ally and, spoiler alert, the final unifier of Japan. And of course, Oda Nobunaga, he went from being a minor, struggling warlord to the most talked about, most feared, and most ambitious leader in the entire country.
So here's the bottom line. The miraculous victory at Okehazama was the spark. It was the catalyst. It was that one shocking, improbable event that launched Oda Nobunaga onto the national stage. It was the first major step in his ambitious quest to end a century of civil war and forge a single, unified Japan. And all of this leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about, doesn't it? When you look at the rise of Oda Nobunaga, the start of his critical alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, and everything that led to the unification of Japan, can one single stormy afternoon, one 2-hour battle, really change the entire course of a nation's history? Well, the story of Okehazama seems to have a very clear answer. Yeah, it absolutely can.